Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. This past podcast, we talked about a couple of very impressive teams in the Golden State Warriors and the Brooklyn Nets. And this podcast, we thought we might do some other impressive teams, but some disappointing teams as well, and players who have been impressive and disappointing. So, Sap, early returns on our biggest surprises and our biggest disappointments. Is there one team and one player that jump at you immediately? I'm not limiting you to just one, but just right off the top of your head, do you have anything?
Yeah, in terms of a surprise, the one team that's just absolutely shocked me is Washington, right? They're
Yeah,
10 and
has to be.
3
Has to be.
atop the Eastern Conference. Bradley Beal's only averaging 23 points per game, so he's fitting more into the team concept. They traded Russell Westbrook, Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell are now playing with Washington, playing at a high level. They signed Spencer Dinwiddie as a free agent, which was a really nice signing. Again, not a huge name, but if you follow basketball, you know he's a quality player, right? So they went and built an actual roster. I don't think they're going to keep this up, but they are playing excellent defense, which to me is sustainable. First month of the season, they have to be the biggest surprise in the NBA. And in the Western Conference, actually, I think the Phoenix Suns have been a huge surprise. They're 10 and 3. I thought they were going to have this massive hangover after losing in the NBA Finals. I believe they got off to a 2-2 start. They won 8 out of 9. You got the DeAndre Ayton contract situation hanging over them. You got Robert Sarver, the crazy owner that was exposed in a lengthy report by ESPN. Nonetheless, they're playing at a very high level. So I'd say surprises: Eastern Conference, Washington; Western Conference, Phoenix.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with either of those answers. To me, Washington's the obvious answer is the biggest surprise in the league right now, that they're 10 and 3 and on top of the East is downright shocking. I mean, because they were, for the most part, last year a bad team. So I think everybody's pretty floored with how well they've played, and they're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They went on the road, they went at home, scoring 108 points a game. They have a +5 scoring difference. I mean, they're doing everything right, Sap. So yeah, hard to argue against them being the biggest surprise. And as far as Western Conference teams, for me, the biggest surprise, I agree with you on Phoenix, but I'm gonna, just for the sake of argument, to go with a different team and say the team we talked about in our last show, which is Golden State. I thought they would be better than they were last year, but I didn't think they'd be this 12-2 and just destroying everybody they play. Sap, 13.6 point per game differential. I mean, they're crushing teams. They're not just beating them, they're crushing them. So, and that's the highest mark in the league by a lot, by a very healthy margin. So I am very surprised that Golden State is playing at this level. I'm not surprised that they're better than last year, but the fact that they are looking like Golden State from a couple of years ago is surprising to me.
Yeah, they're on a 70-win pace, which I don't think is going to happen. I think it's going to be difficult to win 60 games for any team this year because, we're still in the COVID pandemic. There's some weird scheduling where you spend 3 nights in the same city and play 2 games. We saw the Celtics split 2 games in Cleveland over a 3-day period. So you see a lot of that in the league, and then there's load management and all of that stuff. But yeah, Golden State's been phenomenal. I'm going to throw one more team in the Western Conference that, quite frankly, has been a surprise to me, is the Clippers. Right, they're 9 and 5. Paul George is playing like an MVP. We know they don't have Kawhi Leonard. I expected them to be below 500 out of the playoff picture. They've been a pleasant surprise as well, and Paul George, stepping up big time.
Yeah, he is. He's, and especially, I think you and I both, when we did our season preview, thought that they might be in for a dip, not just because Kawhi Leonard was out, but because Paul George would just be gassed. He played so many minutes last year and in the playoffs and was asked to do so much, and he hasn't had any sort of problem with that at all this year. He's been terrific and been pacing the Clippers, and I don't think they're by any stretch a title contender, but the fact that they're staying afloat and not completely bottoming out is certainly a nice surprise for them. Other teams you could certainly say that are big surprises: the Cavaliers, the team you just mentioned, the Celtics split with. They're 9 and 6 to start the year. They lost Colin Sexton, who was their top scorer from a year ago. They haven't gotten much out of Lauri Markkanen this year, who was their big offseason acquisition. Kevin Love is, sort of a net negative at this point, and yet they're, 3 games above 500 and playing pretty solid basketball, sitting at the 5 seed in the Eastern Conference. Again, early returns. I think ultimately they're not going to make the playoffs, but to be here right now, this is the best Cleveland has looked without LeBron James in 30 years.
Oh, it's been a while. Yeah, seriously. You'd have to go back to before LeBron. In the 90s, they had a nice run there
Mark
with Brad
Price.
Daugherty, Mark Price, Larry Nance, and they couldn't break through and beat the Bulls. Then again, no one could in the 90s. Yeah, I mean, this is the first non-LeBron team that's actually fun to watch. Evan Mobley looks like rookie of the year. I know we compared him somewhat to Chris Bosh, when he came into the league, and I think that's a pretty apt comparison. There's some aspects of his game that reminds me a little bit of Kevin Garnett. I mean,
I agree.
Blasphemy, but I don't want to make that comparison quite yet. Like, I don't think people should be comparing Mac Jones to Tom Brady. Not fair.
No, I do.
But yeah, go right ahead. His numbers have been better than Brady's rookie season or his first year as a starter. I get that, but the sport was so different 20 years ago that 18 touchdowns.
You can make direct comparison.
Yeah, Mac better than Tom Brady without question. So he's going to win 9, 10, 11 Super Bowls, no question about that. But Evan Mobley's been the best rookie. So yeah, Cleveland's been a pleasant surprise. It's good to see some of these teams that are never factors actually be factors, right? Washington, Cleveland doing a really nice job. And I don't know if they can continue doing that, but their fan bases at least should be happy that those teams are at least competitive.
Right. Well, the funny thing is so far about the season, talking about surprises and disappointment, the West is sort of like, okay, all these teams that are in the mix in the West right now, again, early returns. You're like, yeah, okay. These are the usual suspects, Dallas, Utah, Clippers, Nuggets. Lakers are hanging in there. The Warriors, obviously, the Suns were the conference champions last year. And then you look at the top of the East, you're like, the Wizards and the Bulls are in there.
Right, the Bulls. Yeah, we didn't mention them. Yeah, we didn't even mention the Bulls.
I would say it makes no sense right now.
It makes no sense. Like upside down. I didn't mention the Bulls because I'm not really surprised by this. I was high on the Bulls. I think they could be as high as the fourth best team in the Eastern Conference, and maybe even higher. I think, eventually Milwaukee will figure out what they're doing. They'll get their injured guys back. Brooklyn's still really talented. Philadelphia, we'll see when Embiid comes back and what they do with Simmons. But I'm not shocked that Chicago's been this good. I mean, you got two elite wing guys in Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, and then Lonzo Ball's playing like the second pick in the 2017 draft should play like, right? So yeah, I think they're not really a surprise. That's not a surprise to me. Whereas I think Washington, they got rid of Westbrook, which is probably a good move, right? And they brought in, role players, and it's working, and they're playing defense, and they're building something there. So those are the teams that I think have been surprising in the first month.
Yeah, in talking about Chicago, Sap, that sort of leads me right into my biggest surprises for players, and it's not a knock on him, but I didn't think he was going to do this. As DeMar DeRozan has been playing like an MVP. I mean, he has just been fantastic for the Bulls. All their acquisitions have been good. Not knocking anybody, but he's been their MVP. He's averaging almost 27 points a game, Sap. And I think this is a guy a lot of people thought was at the back end of his career. This has been the best season of his career. He's integrated seamlessly to Chicago. He's also rebounding and passing the ball a little bit too. 5 rebounds, 4 assists. Not bad for him. And I mean, really, he's been just on an absolute tear for Chicago, pacing them. And this is a team that also has another elite scorer in Zach LaVine, and an elite distributor in Lonzo Ball, and another very good scorer, rebounder, Nikola Vucevic. I mean, they got some damn good players in the Bulls, but DeMar DeRozan has been, to me, the biggest surprise, because I thought he would score 18 a game on this team. But I mean, I think he's 4th in the league in scoring, Sap.
He's playing like Kawhi Leonard, right? That mid-range game. And now he's added the 3-point shot to his repertoire. He's playing fantastic basketball again. And again, this is a guy who's had a really nice career in Toronto. He goes to San Antonio and it just doesn't fit. And San Antonio's kind of like the Patriots. Sometimes guys go to the Patriots or the Spurs and it just doesn't work. They don't fit into the system, and then they go elsewhere and it works in the next stop. So yeah, DeMar DeRozan has played outstanding. LaVine coming off really being a big contributor to the Olympic team. And look, the biggest factor in this team winning, I think, is Lonzo Ball, who, was the second pick in the 2017 draft, and a lot of pressure going to the Lakers, and it just didn't work out. The next year, LeBron comes, it doesn't work out. He goes to New Orleans, they move on from him, and look, he's playing at an all-star level. So yeah, what Chicago's done is fantastic, and DeMar DeRozan has been a pleasant surprise when you consider he's a multiple-time All-Star, but he's playing even better in his first year in Chicago. I'm going to throw someone out who I think has had a fantastic first month of the season is Miles Bridges in Charlotte. He's averaging 22 points per game. Last year was 13 points per game. He's like elevated himself up into a really good player. Charlotte, another surprise team. You look at Miles Bridges, Terry Rozier, LaMelo Ball, Gordon Hayward. Again, when you have four players like that can all score and can all contribute, you've got a puncher's chance every night because those four guys can put 80 points per game up among them, and you're right in contention. But Miles Bridges has really stepped up this year for Charlotte.
Yeah, he's been terrific. He took a huge leap from last year to this year. Another guy in the Eastern Conference that seems to have taken a leap is Tyler Herro. Is playing really, really well for the Miami Heat. When we did our season preview, I said I love this Heat team in terms of roster. I think the one thing that could hold them back is their lack of scoring. They need Tyler Herro to step up as a scorer, a 20-point game scorer off the bench. He has done exactly that. He's averaging 21 points a game to start the year. And that makes the Heat even more dangerous than they were, preseason, which we knew was going to be a great defensive team and sort of gritty. But Herro adds another extra dimension of a very capable scorer. Last year, he struggled a lot. You heard reports that he was sort of being entrapped by the fame and the Miami nightlife, and it seems like he's sort of figured things out, at least to start the season, and is really scoring at a really nice clip for the Heat, which takes a lot of pressure off of the older guys on that team like Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry, to not have to take on as much scoring pressure and to focus more on their defense and their playmaking. And that just makes the Heat that much better. So he's another surprise to me. I thought that he would be better than last year, but he's really, really picked up his game. So in terms of positive surprises, I think those guys that we all mentioned in the Eastern Conference, because the East is, again, so wonky right now that it makes sense a lot of those players would come from the East.
I'll throw one more name out there, Tyrese Maxey of Philadelphia. He's more than doubled all of his numbers from a year ago. Now he's playing more than he did as a rookie, but it appears that Philadelphia feels comfortable with him being the point guard so that when they decide to move on from Ben Simmons and try to get as much back from him, that they're willing to give the keys to the car to Tyrese Maxey. Once you get Joel Embiid back from the COVID issue, I think Philadelphia can begin to look more like a contender, but Tyrese Maxey is a very nice player who's playing at a nice level this year.
Okay, I just thought of one more. This is going to be the last positive surprise. Okay. Cole Anthony.
We got to get into some negativity here at some point.
That's true. Cole Anthony of the Orlando Magic. Now, the Magic have not been playing well. They've been bad. I like Cole Anthony is a dad. Obviously, Greg played in the NBA for a long time. Solid player. Cole Anthony was a really high recruit. He had an up and down rookie season. I did not think he was capable of this. I thought he was going to be a solid pro, like his dad, nothing spectacular. He's averaging 20 points a game, 6.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists a game, Sap. He's had a couple of 30-point games this year. He's been spectacular for the Magic. And again, they suck, but he's been consistently putting up 20 points a game. And in his second year has seemed to have taken a big leap from his rookie season. So credit to Cole Anthony, and they have a lot of guards in Orlando with him, Suggs, and whenever Fultz comes back.
Yeah, no, he's been a pleasant surprise. And you see players jump from year one to year two, better nutrition, they work out, they're able to adapt to the league. I think there's a lot of shock when you show up for your first year in the NBA. It's like everybody's just big, fast, athletic, smart, skilled. You don't see that in college. So
right. Last year, no training camp.
No training camp, right? So you have to adapt to that in your second year, and Cole Anthony's done a nice job this year for the Hornets. For the Magic.
In terms of negativity, Sap, I think there's been a lot of disappointing teams. I don't think there's any shortage of them. Obviously, our two teams, the Celtics and the Lakers, have been disappointing to start the year. But since we talk about them ad nauseum, we're going to talk about them a lot on Friday with the teams playing each other. Let's just skip those two teams just because we're going to talk about them more. So take out the Celtics and the Lakers. Who else have been disappointing to you this year?
Well, Milwaukee. I mean, they're below 500. I know Giannis has the ankle situation and Middleton has been out with COVID, but it doesn't seem like they're playing with much intensity. Again, it's only the first month. Their season ended just a few months ago when they won their first championship in 50 years. So I understand that. But Phoenix, which lost in the finals, has come out strong. Milwaukee, which won the finals, has come out somewhat weak. They're not playing with the same defensive intensity that they have in their past. So I'm kind of disappointed with them. I didn't think they'd get off to like a 12-2 start like Golden State, but I thought they'd get off better than. Been a disappointment. And also New Orleans. I know there's no Zion Williamson, and right now they're 2-13 when we're recording this podcast, which is just unbelievable. I mean, the only team worse than them is Houston, which has 1 win, but they still have, Brandon Ingram and Jonas Valanciunas. They should win more than 2 games with those 2 guys, right? I would think when Zion comes back, obviously that's going to have an impact, but I'd say New Orleans has been a major disappointment. I didn't expect them to be a playoff team, but I thought they would be just like just outside the playoffs, not contending for maybe the first overall pick, which is what they've been in the first month of the season.
Yeah, they're a freaking mess. I mean, they're an absolute mess in New Orleans, and their roster has gotten so much worse. I mean, a couple of years ago, they had Drew Holiday and Lonzo Ball on this team too, and those guys are both gone for minimal to zero return, other than draft capital. But they've gotten, since Zion has gotten there, they've gotten worse, which is hard to believe. It's a mess in New Orleans, and it's, I don't know when Zion's coming back. I think, he just started workouts. I'm sort of getting the feeling that he might not come back this year. What would be the point if when he comes back, they have 2 or 3 wins? We've seen him be a great player when he's healthy, but I don't know that anybody can dig him out of that type of hole. So at that point, you're like, well, why am I coming back to a team that is going to finish bottom 3 in the conference? I agree with you, Sap. I mean, 2-13, that's putrid, and they should be better than that.
Better than that. Do what Golden State did a couple of years ago. Just tank, end up getting James Wiseman with the 2nd pick, or do what San Antonio did over 20 years ago. And again, that's like drawing an inside straight flush. I mean, they had David Robinson miss the entire year. They ended up with the 1st pick and got Tim Duncan. I mean, I don't think there's anybody playing college basketball right now that's going to have the career that Tim Duncan had, not even close. But, sometimes that's what you need to do. Make sure that Zion gets that body, is healthy. He's got to get that weight off because it's putting much too much pressure on his joints. I'm not sure, I love the player. I love Zion Williamson. I just like the personality. He seems like a dynamite kid. I think at some point he could be the face of the league, but you can't be the face of the league when you're not playing. So that's
and when you're
thing.
60 pounds overweight.
Right. I mean, unless it's a sideshow at that point. I mean, he's gonna turn into Refrigerator Perry, who was a big star on the Bears in 1985, but had a short career. Let's hope that doesn't happen with Zion Williamson. But I'd say New Orleans has been disappointed because Brandon Ingram, I still think, is a nice player, as is Valanciunas. They should win more than 2 games in the first month, but that's where they're at right now.
Yeah, they've certainly been very, very disappointing. The other conference finalists from the East last year, so both the Eastern Conference finalists, the Bucks and the Hawks, very disappointing. The Hawks are 6-9. They've started out really slow. A lot of complaints from Trae Young about the new ball and the new officiating. They don't seem to have gotten their mojo back from the playoffs at all. So they've been very disappointing. Portland, I think that Damian Lillard is more disappointed than what the actual perception of what the Blazers actually are in terms of their record. To me, they look like about a 500 team. They're playing like a 500 team. I think Lillard was hoping that, when he recommitted to the team, that they would be a little bit better than this. So I think sort of a disappointment to the eye of the beholder with the Trailblazers.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, and obviously we'll discuss the Lakers and Celtics tomorrow on our podcast leading up to that matchup at TD Garden. Leave them out of it. They've both been disappointing, but we can get really deep into the weeds with those 2 teams tomorrow.
In terms of disappointing players, Sap, does anybody jump out at you?
Well, I'm going to leave the Celtics and Lakers out of this because maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow, because obviously Jason Tatum's probably been the biggest disappointment in the league. I think you can make a case for that. He's supposed to be an MVP candidate, and he's regressed to being, a maddening player. I'm going to take a veteran who I think is a spectacular player. He's a future Hall of Famer, made it to the NBA's all 75 anniversary teams. James Harden has been horrible this year. And I know he's coming off an injury. he still just looks completely out of shape, which may be because of the injury that he can't get in the condition he wants to, but it looks like he's just kind of lost it. And I think that he's really been impacted by a looser whistle or a tighter whistle. I'm not sure how you would phrase that, but they're not calling fouls as much, especially with a player like Harden who lives at the free throw line. I mean, he's averaging only 7 free throw attempts per game, or actually it's less than that. He's generally in the 10, 11, 12 range. I mean, he's a guy who lives at the foul line, not getting there as much this year, and I think it's impacted him. I mean, a guy like this averaging 20.7 rebounds and 9 assists per game, that's not James Harden type numbers. 43% from the floor, 38% from three. That's below his career average. And again, he just looks like he's not quite with it. And I just wonder, and why not? Let's blame Kyrie Irving for this. How much Kyrie Irving has sapped the energy out of the Brooklyn Nets. And again, they're not off to a terrible start. They're 10-5, but all 5 of their losses are by double digits. When they lose, they lose. It's like they just, send up the white flag. And I think we saw that the other night when Steve Nash pulled the starters with 9 minutes left against Golden State. It's like, we're not going to win. Why waste it? Harden's been a major disappointment this year because we're so used to him being a guy that plays at, top 5, top 7 level. Right now, he looks like he may not even make the All-Star team at this point.
Yeah, I think he's certainly a good pick because I do think the rule changes have had a massive impact on how he plays. I'm going to go with a more broad answer. I'm going to say the 2021 rookie class has been disappointing to me.
Yep.
There's been some guys who've stood out a little bit. Scotty Barnes, we talked about Evan Mobley a little bit. Those guys have looked the part. But the other guys, a lot of the other guys, especially the top 2 picks, Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham, have been disappointing to me. I thought Jalen Green, based off of him playing in the G League last year, was going to be able to come in on the Rockets are horrible, on a horrible Rockets team where he's going to get a ton of shots, a ton of minutes, and be able to score at least closer to 20 points. He's at 14 right now, and had a lot of single-digit games. I didn't think that was going to happen to him at all. I'm not saying I didn't expect him to score super efficiently to start, but I thought he would be scoring in the 20s a lot more consistently. He's had one 30-point game. It was obviously against the Celtics. And so that's been disappointing to me. And Cade Cunningham has been horrific shooting the ball to start his career. Sap really just, I think I'm looking at his numbers right now, shooting 36% from the floor. That's not good. 30% from 3. That's not good. He's been, he looks like a rookie. And I thought he was, again, on not a very good team, such a well-rounded player, going to be able to come in and be more efficient, more dynamic. And I'm not saying this is a judgment of what they're going to be like in their careers, but I did expect a little bit more from those 2 guys to start their career, especially scoring the basketball. Sap, I'm surprised. And same with Jalen Suggs too. Maybe it's because of the emergence of Cole Anthony, who's one of my pleasant surprises. I haven't seen a lot from Jalen Suggs in terms of consistency, and maybe that's asking a lot for a rookie. But I don't know. This class just hasn't played as well as I thought they were going to be so far.
No, it really hasn't. The first 2 picks, Cunningham and Green, you would expect them to put them because their teams are so bad. Like there's just going to be blowouts where they get a lot of cheap points, and at the end of the night they have 20 points, and they at least impress there, and they've been able to do that. Again, you were higher on Cunningham than I was. I don't think he's athletic enough to be an elite player. I think he can be a really good player, but I think his lack of athleticism can hinder him at some point. Green, I didn't know much about because he was playing in the G League. He appears to be a very, very explosive scorer. I think Mobley has been the best rookie, and I think Scotty Barnes has been the biggest surprise. I mean, he really is a guy who fits perfectly in Toronto. It's like Toronto's always drafting 6'7", 6'8", 6'9" guys who
they're so good at scouting.
Things. They really are.
Good at scouting.
They're the best at that. They'll take guys late in the first round, like Pascal Siakam, and he turns into an all-star, right? They seem to find those players and really get the most out of them. Suggs has been a disappointment. He's my favorite player in the draft. I didn't think he was going to be the best player in the draft. Just I like him personally. I think he's also a guy, though, that needs players around him. And I don't think he's a guy who's going to carry a franchise. I think he's more of a pure point guard who's going to play good defense, be a good facilitator and a leader, but those types of players need other players around them to shine. And right now, Orlando doesn't have that. But that's a good point, Jet. The draft class of 2021, which we all thought was going to be really good, off to a slow start. But again, it's only a month into the season.
Right. So obviously there's been Hall of Fame players who've gotten off to slow starts. So this doesn't mean that any of these guys aren't going to be great players. I just thought that they would start a little bit quicker because they had more normalcy than last year's rookie class, where they had, preseason, they had training camp. And it's been a really slow start for the most of them.
Yep.
Not surprisingly, somebody like Chris Duarte, my guy from Oregon, has gotten off to a little bit of a quicker start, 4-year college guy. So, for those people who are questioning staying in college, maybe for some players it works. You're a little bit more seasoned. Maybe your ceiling is a little bit lower, but you're more NBA ready. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing.
Did we see Malcolm Brogdon 5-6 years ago win MVP, win Rookie of the Year as a second round pick because he was a 4-year college guy? Yeah, you step in, you're a man. You're fully developed physically, mentally. You're professional right away. I mean, you're just more mature than an 18 or 19-year-old who's dominated throughout whatever level he's played. But all of a sudden now you're in the NBA and it's like, oh, this is a little bit different. So yeah, great point there. Duarte's been sensational. But again, 4-year player in college, that's a big difference.
Yeah. So obviously I expect all these guys, Green, Cunningham, Suggs, the other guys, I think they'll figure it out. And be solid players. Well, I don't know that they'll all be all-stars, but play better than they are now. I'm surprised that they've gotten off, especially with Green and Cunningham, because their teams are so devoid of really much talent. Mm-hmm. It's not like Suggs is on a great Magic team, but he's at least, it makes some sense to me because Cole Anthony has sort of emerged. And so it makes sense that Suggs goes to the side. I still think he should be playing better, but for Green and Cunningham to not be scoring a lot on teams that desperately need scoring, it's not concerning, but it's surprising. So in terms of negative surprises, I'll just put that rookie class on there, Seth. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Good point.
Anybody else that's
no, that's about
negative
it.
Wise?
No, that. I mean, we'll get into Tatum and anybody on the Lakers tomorrow when we break down those two teams.
Yeah, I think we're hamstringing ourselves a little bit because the most disappointing guys have all been from those two teams for the most part. But yeah, we'll talk about them plenty on Friday as the Celtics and the Lakers renew their rivalry, both in not a great start to the season for both of them, but it's still Celtics and Lakers. So it'll be fun to watch. But that's going to do it for us here today, Sap, on the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. As always, we're presented by Full Press Coverage. Go check out the website for lots of great podcasts and articles and content. And make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. Check out the youtube.com/Jet Stryer, and find the podcast wherever podcasts are found. We'll be back on Friday with a new edition of the show, talking about the Celtics and the Lakers, looking at that matchup, more so looking at where the two teams are at right now. So make sure you check that out, and we'll talk to you later. See you, everybody.